Hmm. Hello, and a very warm welcome to those of you that have joined us. We are at the last conversations of 2022. So a big congratulations to making it to this point of the year. And thank you very much, Angela, for getting us going there. It looks like we're again a little group, which is really great. So welcome to the conversations on decoloniality and fashion. Tonight we are going to be the same process. We're really just going to open up a conversation around a particular chapter that we've co-written, and then invite some feedback and conversation with you. So we'll, again, as normal, record the first 30 minutes. It's myself, Erica de Greef, and together with Angela Jansen, we'll be talking about our chapter that is titled Conversations on Decoloniality and Fashion, Hosting, Listening and Unlearning, for which we were guided by our decolonial elders and mentors, Roland Vasquez and Walter Magnola, as we reflect on our journey of unlearning through nearly 2 years of these conversations. So in this chapter, we consider what it means to reflect on not only our own spaces of speaking, but also on hosting other voices and taking responsibility for holding space. And we think about what practicing decoloniality really means in creating and sharing fashion knowledges. So we're just really going to unpack some of the chapter today. And the interesting thing is that we were invited to prepare this chapter by Miguel Angel Gardetti and Patricia LaRose Francia for a book that's going to be published in 2023 by Springer. And it's the original title for the book was going to be Other Fashion, but it, I think with the particular sort of range of chapters that they got, the book has kind of shifted into this space of sustainability challenges in the fashion industry, civilization crisis, decolonization, cultural legacy, and transitions. So it's quite a hefty title that our chapter is landing into, and I think really interesting how, and it's happening in a number of spaces, how the fashion conversation is taking on this climate challenge. I think for a very long time, there was this big distance between the two, the kind of climate challenges, the civilizational challenges, and the fashion industry. So this coming together of these different voices. So we look forward to the book as well. And one of our other special people in the RCDF, Mi Medrado, is also contributing a chapter to this book. So that's really exciting for us. And so I'm wondering, I think, Angela, maybe what we should start with is just kind of unpack what it was that kind of got the chapter going. We didn't prepare an abstract planning to do this. It kind of, an invitation came our way, and maybe you just want to talk about that, how that kind of resulted in the chapter.
Yes, thank you, Erica. Well, it was actually quite a coincidence, right? But when you don't believe in coincidences, it was just meant to be. No, so actually when we were preparing for 2022, we reached out to Walter Mignolo, to see if he would accept to join us again. And he was very kind as always and very willing to join again, but he asked us what we had actually learned after the first year of the conversations. And as he always comes with these wise remarks, we were actually, you know, taken off guard. We were like, well, actually, you know, we've been so focused, you know, on the logistics and, you know, keeping the conversations going that we never actually took a moment for ourselves to, yeah, to stand still and reflect on what was then the first year of the conversations. And we're now actually talking, well, it's already the end of the second year of the conversations, which is, you know, but and at the same time, yes, we received an invitation if we wanted to, if we were willing to contribute a chapter to this new edited volume that Miguel and Patricia were working on. And so it kind of like, you know, coincided that we thought, well, why don't we take this opportunity to contribute a chapter on reflecting on the first year of conversations. And so that's, you know, how it all came together. And after that, we kind of like reached out to Rolando, who of course has and continues to play incredibly important role to our thinking, learning, and especially unlearning. But he couldn't commit to write the chapter with us, but he did offer us his guidance in writing this chapter, which I think also was something we hadn't thought of, but it turned out to be such an amazing experience, maybe even more so than writing it with him. I think like when we reached out to him and we had that conversation with him, as always, he gave us these amazing ideas to think about. You know, I mean, in all honesty, when I started sitting down with myself and reflecting, I started reflecting from my own, you know, positionality, from my own thinking. And one of the first things Rolando said when we had a conversation with him, he was, the danger of reflecting again is starting from that positionality of self. Whereas, so he, yeah, straight away kind of like pointed out the first mistake I was about to make of thinking from my own learning and unlearning, whereas he encouraged or invited us, like he always does, so gently and wisely, to reflect on the communal again and on the hosting of this space, not for us, but how we have been learning and especially transitioning in this relation to the people who have been joining us over at that point the first year, but now already the second year. And that, so that completely, right, that first advice, if you like, already completely changed my way of reflecting on the conversations. And yeah, so it's, you know, we took it from there.
And I think also what happened is this invitation, firstly by Walter, and then the invitation by Rolando to kind of think with, as elders, allowed us to kind of process with the chapter, and then invite Shayna into dialogue as well in the chapter. So we then, this act of what it means to put on paper a set of thoughts that then reflect not just our individual experiences, but a collective experience. What is it that we were collectively engaging in and making visible? So writing kind of makes visible some of these questions that we were grappling with, I suppose. So Shayna took an active role in also that first draft when, so that was about March, April, May, that we prepared the first draft, and she was able to, engage in the process of our writing. She also had way too many commitments this year to fully commit to co-writing, but this idea of listening in and listening with was very central to the way in which the chapter evolved. So I was thinking maybe I could just sort of really very briefly kind of the 4 parts. And so what also sort of happened is these kind of ideas started to come up. What is it that we were noticing about the conversations? And the first one was really about knowledge engagement rather than consumption. So really engaging with difficult questions or engaging with complexity, and not this easy consumption. I think Angela has said it before that, you know, we started with a much bigger group, kind of trimmed down, slimmed down to a smaller active group online. And I think there are others that engage in the recordings, but to actually engage in this togetherness. So that was quite an important concept that kept coming up in our conversations with Walter and Rolando and Shayna. And then this idea of making community, this emergence of a community over time. So what is it to make community? What is it to meet in difference, but also to meet? So we felt that was another area that kept that kept it going as well. And then so what started to happen in these conversations around, like, what is it that we're reflecting on? We also, between Angela and I, juggling 20 different things, sort of how on earth are we going to write this chapter, as well as do the conversations, as well as do all the other many things that we were involved with. So we then sort of split the chapter up, and Angela took the first section and I took the second section, and Angela took the third section and I took the fourth section, and then we kind of wrote in sections, and then we shared it with one another and kind of wrote into each other's or worked with each other's sections. So I don't know, maybe Angela, if you wanted to come in on that, what that was like, because it was quite an active. I mean, that we did that in the process of writing the draft, but then in our review from the editors, what we did again. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also want to talk about, how you're saying, that the sections kind of like define themselves, right? And I very much remember the first section about this, engaging rather than consuming of knowledge. And that also kind of like tapped into how I kind of like felt for myself that I didn't want to write anymore, that I felt like, how can you write, or kind of like, freeze in time a whole year of conversations, and even the recording of these conversations, does that do justice? Because the process of transformation, and that's what I think Rolando pointed out so beautifully in our conversation, the point of transformation is actually engaging in these conversations. So do you do it justice by recording them? And then, of course, not everybody can always be available and therefore have this desire to then at least have the backup of the recordings. But it's as if it's a moment that you can capture and then kind of like reproduce. Do you feel, or do you get the same opportunity of transformation by being together, engaging in these conversations when you listen to the recording? And I felt like kind of the same thing by writing this chapter. And I asked Rolando, I said, Rolando, how can we capture the experience that we, every time we close off a conversation, we feel this intensity, right? How everybody opened up and shared. We've had moments, that we've been crying, that we, really, again, put ourselves in a very vulnerable situations and shared. And so how can you put that in a book chapter, really? And Rolando said it so beautifully, because he also kind of like made this comparison with his vistas of modernity, where he felt like he didn't want to write a book, but then he also saw how important of a tool it became for so many people, people looking for ways to putting words into our experiences, in what they are feeling, what they're going through. And so he also literally asked us, who and why are you writing this chapter? Remember? And he said, like, if the answer is to kind of like, whatever, improve your reputation or improve whatever, then there's no point. But look for yourself why you want to write this chapter. And then in the same way, he kind of like considered his vistas of modernity as a tool of like, well, if only this format of conversations can inspire other initiatives to start these conversations, not these conversations, but conversations. And in the end, it's the same what I felt for the assembly, right? The assembly for me was a success when I saw these conversations taking on, amongst coalitions, within coalitions, or amongst different coalitions who participated in the assembly. So yeah, just to get back to that idea, like why are we writing this chapter, or why did we choose or decided to write this chapter as a means of inspiration for hopefully initiating other conversations by other people, and this format of a conversation that cannot be consumed, but and where you, and especially since we've become smaller, the group has become smaller, where you are kind of like forced to engage in this conversation because it's so small. So it is quite hard to hide. So so that was one thing. And the other thing was the sense of taking responsibility. I felt that was also something that popped up. I think that became our the undoing of innocence. That was also something I felt really strongly about, and that kind of, I don't know how that started. Oh yeah, it was also with vistas of modernity and this place of innocence, and how in a conversation, again, you can't really hide. Like when you write academic texts, there's this idea of the autonomous, like the autonomous artist, there's this idea of the autonomous academic or thinker or intellectual, where you can kind of like hide behind your whatever professional or your practice as a thinker. Whereas in a conversation, again, through that engaging, through that coming together in relation, you can't find or hide behind a place of innocence. And so I think those were the two sections that I really felt drawn to including in this reflection. But then also, yeah, the making of community, remember? Because it was after we participated in an event that to me felt artificially put together as a community. And then I started thinking, so what is that community? And that idea of having a common struggle, as Maria Lugones brought forward, and this idea of deep coalition is in that difference, finding a common struggle or having a common struggle.
Yeah. So I think that undoing of innocence was kind of like our section 3, sort of the acknowledging of the implications of all our doing in terms of sort of relationality and systems. And then I think our fourth section in the chapter really started to explore, what does it mean to give space? What does it mean to create space? And I think as a text, as a chapter, being ready for a book on fashion and sustainability, it's I think the nuances of what decoloniality can bring to fashion. Again, it's to start those conversations around innocence and ethics in the fashion system, or the nuances of designers and artisans working together, so again, even our chapter is not necessarily an easy application into a fashion system, even though, I mean, that wasn't our task. But I'm just curious how even the work of undoing so much of this fashion system has to happen on so many different levels, that as a tool for thinking through sort of decolonizing fashion, has the conversations made evident some practices that could be useful in a fashion system in the future, in an alternate fashion system or in a decolonial fashion system?
Well, I mean, I think we put it quite straightforward in the chapter that we're not about a 5-step plan how to decolonize, and again, I think that is the whole engagement in this conversation again. You can only reflect, or you can only, work, or whatever, learn, unlearn, transform yourself. And it's through this process of conversations that we, or at least I, learn. But I can't then, go and write a book for somebody else how to go through the steps and then decolonize. It's such an individual and ongoing, let's be honest, ongoing process. So yeah, I find it very hard how we are formatted to look for again a canon, right? People want a canon of decolonial fashion. Like, okay, give us a book that we can read, and then we can go through the steps and be decolonial or whatever. I mean, especially in the beginning, we know that quite a few people joined the conversations because they wanted a clear-cut plan. Like, okay, I have to do this, because I'm a curator or I work in an institute or whatever, and this is on the agenda. So just tell me how to do it, and then I can move on with my life. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So yeah, I think again, the people who do engage in the conversations, have to put in the work or go through their own steps as they, and maybe that's one of, if you like, the critiques maybe of the conversations, is there's no outcome. There's no like, okay, we've done this for 2 years now, we've seen the light, we have the answers, and we'll give you a book.
Yeah. But maybe that is also what the chapter is allowing. The chapter is allowing a kind of insight into process, and it's that insight into process which that can then be mirrored or can then be understood or worded in other spaces, and until we kind of demonstrate, and maybe that's sort of where I thought maybe just to wrap it up for the recording, but the last sort of section where we kind of sort of brought in the idea of the Global Fashioning Assembly as a kind of way in which to practice a different kind of knowledge engagement, a different kind of community making, a different kind of undoing of innocence, a different kind of plurality. So
yeah, there's a few questions. I don't know if you want to address them before we stop the recording, or invite everyone in to join, or
okay, well, do you want to stop the recording here?
yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much.